All right, welcome back to in-person classes. I'm glad to see everyone here. I'm glad to see the people that are connected via WebEx. Is the audio working on WebEx? You give a thumbs up or something if the audio is working. You hear me? Let me check. Well, Gabriel, can you hear me? Just 1 second. I apologize for this. Microphone appears to be working, so I'm going to go ahead and continue lecturing and hope that there's no technical difficulty, because as we can see, the microphone meter is working. All right, so we're going to cover more tags today. HTML is a question of how to do something in HTML is simply, well, what tags do you use? Because tags are what define what a piece of text means on a web page. And we looked at so many tags last time in the pre-recorded lecture, and we looked at some on the first day. So what I want to do is kind of review those and introduce some new ones to the equation. So I have a page here that represents a page about Lorain Community College's CISS programs. And let's view that. We can see we have heading on a header on the top of the page, or a heading on the top of the page. We have some other headings. We have some links on the page. These are internal links because they do not take us to another web page. They take us to a specific spot within our own web page. We have a back to the top link. And we have some distinct sections here. This is one section. This is another section. Third section. A fourth section. We have a footer. And let's look at the tags that create this. So, in doing so, we'll revisit tags that we've seen previously. So let me bring it up and I'm going to start using, in this class, Visual Studio Code. This is another way to edit your web page code. It is available both on Mac and PC. And it's nice because it has IntelliSense. In other words, it will kind of show you and point you in the right direction if you're missing something or if you have something spelled wrong or whatever. So it's a good thing to use.
I think IntelliSense is good because I remember you use Visual Studio a lot when you're taking like a C# course. So IntelliSense, if it's what you want, you can hit tab and it'll put up for you. But if it's not what you need or what you want, then you have to manually change it yourself.
Yeah, as an educator, I have mixed feelings about IntelliSense. In one respect, it's kind of like letting someone use calculator in a math class, right? You know, when you're first learning math, you don't get to use a calculator because they want you to learn it and to know it. And once you're capable with math and you're tackling bigger problems, well, then it's okay to use the calculator as a tool. But, so I have mixed feelings about that. Part of me says, well, you should code this by hand and really learn the tags. But IntelliSense is a nice tool to have, so I have mixed feelings. All right, anyhow, let's look at what we have here. And some of this we're going to ignore for now. Some of this we will and come back to later, but we have our doc type on the top of the page. We have HTML, our beginning document, our beginning HTML tag, and our ending HTML tag. Everything is between that start and end tag. We then have a head section and a body section. Everything that appears here on the page is the body of the page. Title on the head of the page is up here in the tab within the browser. Notice these tags don't overlap at all. The head tag has its start and end tag, and the body tag has its start and end tag. Notice that the tags are indented within each section. At a glance, I can see, for example, that this header tag is within the body. It's important to indent things to show what is contained in what, because that will help you write good code and make sure that your code follows the proper nesting rules for tags. All right, those are all tags we've seen before. We've seen H1s before. We probably saw H2s before. And we saw paragraphs before. This, by the way, is something called Greek text. And it is sort of a fake Latin Greek combination that web designers sometimes use when they're planning out a page to make sure if they just need some dummy text to put in there that doesn't, maybe they don't have the correct text that they're eventually going to put on the page. Now, here's something that you should realize, though. Don't turn in any assignments with Greek text in it. I use it here simply so you're not watching me type over and over again, all right? But don't turn in any assignments. It's useful when you're planning out a page. So maybe when you're designing a page, it's useful to have, but don't put it in the final product. I've seen students do that, and that will always be a deduction. So that's the tags that we've seen before. Let's look at the new tags. First of all, we have a number of tags that are meant to define the basic structure of a page. And let's look at them. This sort of banner on the top of the page, you could call the header of the page. So I'm going to put these things in a document so you can read them. One of the new tags that we're going to talk about is the header of a page. And I know that's a little confusing because we already have a head and we have an H1. Right? I didn't make the rules. I'm just telling you how it works. All right, but that is meant to be the header is the banner on the top of the page. The H1 is a heading. And the head tag contains information about the page, such as the title. And we'll see that example going forward. We have a nav section. Nav is short for navigation. In other words, how do you get around the page or how do you get from one page to another? On LC's web page, that would be this over here, right? This shows us the navigation, the places that we can possibly go to. We then have different sections of the page. This is a section. This is a section. This is a section. This is sort of a big section in the news. Each one of these is sort of an article within that section. And finally, we have a footer on the bottom of the page. So other tags that we have indicate a section, an article, and a side, which might be something like this. This is sort of some side information, not necessarily the main information, but some additional information on the page. And then finally, we have a footer. So these are the tags that we're gonna, we can have in our current example. I do want to note that I've signed up for this pickleball tournament, or not tournament, but class. However, I thought it was over the weekend, and it turned out to be Monday. So I could hardly miss class to attend a pickleball class. So I had to drop out of that class. I wish they'd offer one on the weekend, but anyhow, that's neither here nor there. All right, so let's look at our page now, and let's look at the tags on those pages. All right, this is the header. That header contains of an H1 and an H2. So actually, this is the header on the web page, which consists of two headings. A header will usually contain headings. It might contain a few links. It might contain a search bar. It might contain an image of the organization's logo. All right, all those things are things that sort of you put on the top of the page so everyone knows immediately what that page is. And you can see that all over the place. This is certainly not the only website that has a header. We go to Amazon. There's a header on top of the page. There's sections. We go to YouTube. There's a header with a logo, sign-in button, search button on the top of the page. We go to eBay. There's a header on the top of the page. And generally speaking, this header is going to be the same on every page. It's a way of identifying your website so people know where they are right off the bat. All right. And it contains headings typically, and it can contain other stuff. Now, that's different than the head, which is a section outside of the body that contains information about the page. In this case, it contains the title of the page, and it contains to this, which we'll talk about possibly today or possibly next week. I then have a navigation section. And these are a series of links. And typically these links are shown in what's called an unordered list. So that's what this tag is. Because if you think about it, a navigation for a page is a list of links. Here's the navigation for the page. What is it? It's a list of links across the page. We look at Lorraine, we look at my campus, Lorraine Community College, list of links, and so on. So we define lists in two different ways. One is with a UL tag, which is an unordered list. An unordered list is one where there's not a natural sequence to put the things in. An OL is an ordered list. So if we were ranking the quarterbacks in the NFL by some rating system, that would be an ordered list because the number one quarterback is the one that has the most points in that system. And then the number two is the second most. And so there's a natural way of ordering that list. Links, however, I could arrange these links any number of ways. I put programming, web development, mobile, and networking. I could arrange it in some other way. I could say web development on top and then networking second, mobile, and programming. I could put it in alphabetical order. I could put it in the order of the popularity. I could put it in any number of different orders. So that's an unordered list. With an unordered list, you have a UL tag at the beginning and the end of the list. And then each item in the list is a UL tag, or I'm sorry, it's an LI tag within the UL tag. Now, what does our list item consist of? A list item can consist of anything, right? It could consist of an image if we wanted it to. It could consist of text, a paragraph. In our case, it consists of a link. A means link. Again, I didn't make up this language, I'm just explaining it to you. So A is short for anchor, and it means a link. And when you see an A, there's a little bit more to the tag than there is to this tag or this tag or this tag. There's some additional information about the tag. Because it's not enough to say we have a link, right? A link where? Which website are we linking to? Or which part of the page are we linking to? We have to specify where we are linking to. And we do that with the href attribute. We say href equals, and then we have the section of the page. How do I know it's the section of the page? Because it starts with a pound sign. And that pound sign relates to an ID attribute on one of the tags. So if I click on networking, it's going to scroll to the point of the page that contains the thing that has an ID of networking. So it's going to scroll to the bottom of the page and show this. Scroll to the bottom of the page where that is. Click mobile, scrolls to the part of the page where that is. It's not enough to say you have a link. You have to specify where the link is linked to. And you do that with an href attribute. If it has a pound sign, that's a section of the page. A section is defined as the thing on the page that has that ID. The ID is another attribute that you have, tags, where you can say, hey, this is the tag that that's identified by networking. Then we have a different LI with a different link for each of those. Now to do a link needs three parts, right? It needs a start tag, it needs the end tag, and it needs some text to click on. I see a lot of students will do something like this. All right? They won't put anything between the starting and ending tag. But when they do that, there's no place for the user to click on. So they can't access that link. With a link, you need something between the start and end tag. And that will be what the user clicks on to take it to that link. Any questions about this style of link? This is one of the kinds of links that we have. Is a link to a section of the page. You see this oftentimes on websites, for example, a frequently asked question website, or like an alphabetical employee directory, right? It might have all the letters in the alphabet, and you click on the S, it takes you to the section of the page where the S's are.
I think a great example is where you can use the we go to look for the academic advisor on LC. They have like all the alpha, all the advisors used by last name.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's under academic advisor. So if you just click, yeah,
Here we go.
perfect example.
Under academic advisors, where do I get?
Sorry, no, like, yeah, something. It's like advisor, I think. Oh, but you see what I mean? It's like yeah.
Advising.
Academic advising. Yeah, that's it. And then that not be yet.
Well, there's not links for that though. Yeah. With this, there's a link that takes you to the page, or the section of the page rather. So nav section is a collection of links. Links are usually stored in an unordered list. An unordered list is a collection of list items. And in the case of nav, those list items will be links of one sort or another. In this example, our links go to sections of the page. Second thing that we could have on the page is one or multiple articles. An article is simply a set of tags that go together. Think of it as sort of a subsection of the page. For your first assignment, for example, where you had to do something about HTML, HTML5, and CSS, you could have created that page. If we had covered that in time, you could have created that page with 3 article tags. And that just means sort of a subsection of the page. All these things go together because all these things are about programming. Now, a section, these 3 tags are very closely related. The section and an article are more or less interchangeable. I might define a portion of the page as a section if, for example, it contained images and no text. Whereas I might call it an article if it contained more text. The bottom line is I wouldn't deduct either way. You decide if you rather make it a section or an article and just go with that. An aside is usually like sort of additional, like less important information. For example, if they had an article about the Super Bowl coming up in January or February, they might have an aside that talked about the city that the Super Bowl was going to be in. You know, sort of like a side story, right? So the main story is about the Super Bowl, but there's a side story that talks about, you know, what it's like in that city, what are popular places to visit, and so on. But these 3 things relate to subsections of the page with content. The header represents a subsection of the page that typically appears at the very top of the page. The nav is a section of the page that contains links that allow the user to move around. And finally, the footer appears at the very bottom. This is a way that you can insert a special symbol. There's a whole list of HTML special symbols. If you Google that. Special characters. including accented letters, quotation mark, an ampersand, parentheses, the @ sign, a tilde, sign for micro, and so on. The one I use is for the little copyright symbol. So if you look at our page in the footer, that little C with a circle around it is this @ copy. Notice I have a link here. And it says href equals mail to : then my email address. The text between the start and ending tag is Mike Zellers, and there's the ending tag. This is a second kind of link, a link that takes you to your mail client, whatever you have set up as your mail client, and will send an email to this person. Now, this isn't going to work because I don't think email is set up on this machine, but I can sort of show you how that works. So if I click on that, it's going to start up the email program. And again, we don't have an account set up, so it's not going to finish it. But if we did have an email account, it would create a new email addressed to that email address. This is a nice feature to allow your users, that way they can just click on something and send an email rather than having to copy and paste the email address. So it's a second kind of link. I'm going to show you a third kind of link in a minute here. This link right here. I have href equals to, and I have the name of a web page. Whenever you just see only the name of the web page, that means it's one of my pages, a page that I have created, and it will be in the same folder as this web page is. So if we look, for example, in this case, I have finish.html and I have tutorial.html. They're in the same folder. That's what we're going to start off doing. All right, we're going to start off by putting all our pages in a single folder. Later on in the class, we'll discuss moving things around to their own folder. All right. So when I click this link, it takes me to the page in the same folder called tutorial.html. So I click on this. It takes me to tutorial.html. Then I can go back to home by putting a link back to this page. Now, sometimes I see students do this. They'll put in as the address that you're going to this long thing that says file C users BU103, blah, 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 blah. Here's the thing. It will work for them. The problem is when I download it to my machine, I don't have those folders set up. And it won't work. So your href for a link of your own should not contain this stuff. File and the list of all the folders. If it's in the same folder, all you need to do is put the last part of that, the name. By the way, it's a good idea to turn on file extensions. What do I mean by that? I mean, when I'm viewing this, show file name extensions is checked. Otherwise, I'll just see this. And you can get the file name wrong if you're just looking at this, because actually an HTML document can have a .html extension, or it also can have a .htm extension. So you want to see the file name extension, so you see the complete file name. Here's the last kind of link that we're going to look at today, and that's a link to someone else's page. And in that case, we have the name of the URL, the whole name, including the HTTPS, and the name of the website that we're going to. So, for example, for this, link to Android, that will take us to the official Android site. Now, if I were to do this, it's not going to work. Why is it not going to work? It's not going to work because it's going to think, because there's none of that HTTP at the beginning, it's going to think that this is a page in the same directory as my initial web page, as this page. And it's not. So therefore, it tells me it can't access that file. So if you're going to someone else's website, https:// and the name of the site. If you want to go to a specific page, on that site, important to remember to save your changes, otherwise you'll be mystified as why it's not working. If I wanted to go, for example, to this page, shop phones, I could actually copy this whole thing into my web page, and then my link will take me to specifically that page. I click that, it takes me now to this page. Right, let's take a minute and summarize what we've covered so far. We've covered several new tags. We've covered several different ways to denote a subsection of our page, a subsection of the body of the page. Header is a subsection of the stuff on the very top of the page. Like that. Don't confuse that with the headings and the head section. Nav is going to be typically an unordered list of links, either to elsewhere on the same web page or to different web pages. A section or an article are just generic subsections of the page. that appear somewhere in the middle of the page. And the side is sort of less important section of the page. And then a footer is the section of the page at the very bottom. Finally, we have a UL and OL for unordered list or ordered list. And each of these contain a set of LI tags or list items. We also covered links. We talked about 4 different kinds of links. This is a link to a section of my page. How do we identify the section of the page? We identify it with an ID attribute on one of the tags. There should be no spaces in the ID, by the way. So just programming. Web will take me to this section of the page. ID of web, and so on. Second kind of link is a link to another one of our pages, another page that we created. And assuming it's in the same folder, all we need for the href is the name of the web page, including the .html. If it's a link to an outside web page, we need the entire URL, the entire address of the page that we are linking to. Finally, if we want to make it an email link, we make this. Are there any questions? Go ahead.
Go over it.
Over what link? We could talk about it. Let's look real quick. Oh, yeah. Now it's not going to work on this, but if you had a mobile device and you put in a telephone number like that, link, call this number. When you click on that, it doesn't know what to do with it because we're on a desktop machine. If we were on a phone, it would ask us if we want to dial it. And that's a very convenient feature for users as well. I love when I go to a website, like on my mobile phone, I'm looking for my insurance agent's number, all right? Rather than having to copy and paste it from the web page, if you just click on that link, that will take you to and automatically dial it if you're on a device that can be dialed, if you're on a phone. Good catch. Other questions? All right. Let's look at our second page that we have here. Because if you notice, that second page had a picture on it. All right. We're going to see basically the same thing, same header. Again, we typically want the header to be the same on every page. The nav section, we probably want that to be the same. I didn't in this case, but it'd probably be a good idea to make it the same. Now we have our footer, we have an article, we have an image tag. And we notice with the image tag, we have 2 additional attributes. One is the source of the image. In other words, the file name of the image that we want to put in there. In this case, the image that we want to put in there is named 1.jpg. I know it's in the same folder because all I have is a file name. Same idea with links. So if I look in this folder where the web page is, I have this 1.jpg. I then have alternative text, which we'll talk about more later on in the class, but this is useful for people that are accessing your page with assistive technology, such as a screen reader. This also displays if for some reason that image isn't available. Now, an image doesn't have stuff in the middle of the tag. So we can use this shorthand to indicate the image is both a starting and ending tag. We can put that slash greater than sign at the end. And that's how we do an image. Now, where can you get images from? Well, you can take the image yourself, right? I took that image, so I don't have to worry about copyright because I own the copyright of that image. You can look for things that are licensed either with public domain or Creative Commons licensing, which specifies the circumstances which you're allowed to use that. So if you did a Google search for an image, let's look for a sunset. I can specify, where do I specify? Usage rights. This is showing me all. This is showing me things that have a Creative Commons license. In other words, things where I can use the image as long as I give proper credit to it. Now, for educational purposes, we can use a limited number of images from a site without getting approval of the copyright holder. And that is something that I believe I have that about guidelines for fair use. I believe I have in the week 1 module. One thing that you do not want to do is hot link. And what do I mean by hot link? Hot link is something like this, where I put the URL of a page, of an image on the internet as the source. That will work. But there's problems with that. One of the problems is we're actually stealing a little bit, stealing's a harsh word, we're actually using some of that site's bandwidth. In other words, we have to ask that server for their image, all right? If we were doing this and if we were doing this on a very popular page, that would be requested over and over and over again and be hitting their server and causing that. The other thing is the person that owns this could actually change pictures on us. That was actually done in a political campaign where someone hot linked, some candidate site hot linked to an image, and the owner of the image replaced it with an embarrassing image. And it took a while for that person to understand or realize what had happened, and that caused problems for them. So what you should do is this. If you want to use this image, actually download it to your local machine and then go in and put the source as being the copy of the file on your local machine. All right. We have a couple more minutes left, and I want to just start to talk about CSS. CSS is the second language that we're going to use in this class. We use HTML to describe the stuff that's on a web page. We have links, we have pictures, we have text, we have heading, all those things. The browser has defaults about how those things appear. With a link, for example, the default is a blue underline for a link. Unless we visited that link, then the default is a magenta underline. Notice on this page, link to Android is as a magenta underline, whereas that has the default blue underline. And since I never clicked the web development link, that also is blue. Well, we can change that if we want. We can change any of the default behaviors of any of the tags using CSS. So by default, certain fonts are used on a web page. Certain sizes of fonts are used on a web page. Certain colors of fonts are used, and so on. CSS allows us to change all of that. And the way that we link to a CSS file is by putting in our head section this. So right now, that file doesn't exist because I renamed it. If I change the name back to what it should be, and refresh the page, I get a different looking page. I would say I get a nicer looking page. Let's look at the basics of CSS, and then the rest, spend some time to investigate. The lab that's due Wednesday, you're not required to have CSS on, but I don't think so anyhow. But this will be giving you sort of put you a little ahead of the game if you review CSS. Actually, I only have a couple of changes to that page. With just a tiny amount of the page, I made it look very, much more professional. The way CSS works is like this. We specify a tag on the page. In this case, we specify the body. We can specify then attributes that we want to change of that body, of that tag, the body, and what their values are. So in this case, we want to set the background color of the page to this code. Now we'll spend more time next time talking about this code, but you can easily Google HTML color codes and oh, here we go. It shows you the code for these. So we have an attribute. The list of attributes are predefined. In this case, background is the background color of the page. A colon, the value we want to change it to, then a semicolon, then the next attribute. In other words, the color of the text. What color we want to change that to. H1, we've said that the background is this, the color is white, so we can also specify the color name, and the font size is 4EM. That means 4 times the normal size. So all those things put together, and we don't get the default black and white like we had before. We get our new bigger H1s, different colors of the text and background, different colors of the text and background for the H1s as well. Now that is just the very, very, very basic introduction to CSS. It shows the purpose of CSS and shows you a little bit about how to use it. There are tutorials online that do a more complete job You go to W3 schools, for example. You could follow a CSS tutorial and it'll show you how to change things. Background color and background are roughly equivalent. But in this case, they make the background color light blue, the H1 the color of white, and align the text in the center, and so on. But I did want to introduce that to you next week, so you can play with it if you want to for Lab 2. I do believe it's a requirement on Lab 3, which is upcoming next Wednesday. We'll talk about it more on next Monday. Are there any questions at this point? All right, that's all I had. We will see you in lab. If not, hope to see you next week.